think tanks like CSIS, this is a think tank which has produced, regular policy reports on China, regular policy reports on Korea, and it has a really large influence on the way that these two countries are portrayed in the media, right? These reports influence legislation, they influence policy, and these reports often get cited by mainstream papers like the New York Times, like the Washington Post, like the Wall Street Journal, as authorities on China and North Korea. And not only that, CSIS reps are often asked for quotes to provide quotes to these same media outlets on articles on China, on articles on Korea. And so it really shapes, our understanding of these two countries. And not only that, but CSIS also, they hold conferences in which they invite defense contractors and national security officials. And, it's at these conferences that, these same defense contractors can bid on government contracts. So it's this interwoven web of these different institutions that interact with one another. You have DC policy think tanks, national security officials, and defense contractors, and they're all part of this military industrial complex. And I think, one really important thing that we have to point out is that think tanks like CSIS, they receive a significant amount of funding from defense contractors. I was writing an article about a year ago, on this kind of funding, and I dug up an annual report from CSIS. It was for the fiscal year 2019-2020. And in that year alone, it doesn't tell you exactly how much money that these defense contractors have given to CSIS. It has brackets, and that kind of gives you an idea. So the top bracket is for those who have donated $500,000 or more, $500,000 or more. And in that bracket is Northrop Grumman, war profiteer Northrop Grumman, right? And then the second bracket is, donations of $200,000 to $499,999. And in that bracket is war profiteer General Atomics, as well as Lockheed Martin and SAIC. And SAIC provides information technology services to the U.S. military, right? And then below in the last bracket are for those who have donated $100,000 to $199,999. And in that bracket, we have Boeing, we have General Dynamics, we have Hitachi, we have Mitsubishi, Samsung, Raytheon. So clearly all these defense contractors have a stake in U.S. military operations in China and in Korea. And so, they stand to make money off of this kind of warmongering. They can sell their services in monitoring Chinese military activities. They can build missile defense systems. They can provide weapons, drones, ships, aircraft, if it ever comes to that. CSIS, I believe, also receives funding from pretty much every Western government and their allies, including the U.S. It receives funding from the Canadian government, from the UAE government, from Japan. It also receives funding from NATO. So, clearly this is all a huge conflict of interest. And the fact that they're producing these reports talking about, how we need to start a war with China, that's a clear conflict of interest, right? So KJ, I'm interested in, what you think about all this. How much does this funding affect the way that CSIS reports on places like China?
Well, I think it's very, very important. Certainly the conflict of interests are over the top. And if we go into the history of CSIS, it actually was part of Georgetown University. It was a research institution inside of Georgetown University. And then eventually Georgetown disavowed it, and they went their separate ways, partly according to insiders, because Georgetown was very, very uncomfortable with the amount of funding that it was getting from military contractors. Also, they were very uncomfortable with its policies. As I said before, it is extreme right-wing, hawkish neocon think tank, and its primary product is propaganda. It's elite propaganda to manufacture consent amongst its elite NatSec NatSec elites, and it's often been described as a parking lot for neocon hotshots. We can think of people like Dick Cheney, Michael Ledeen. One of the EDs was CIA Directorate of Intelligence, the director of Intelligence, Ray Klein. We can think of people like Henry Kissinger and other very, very high level national security, deep state heavyweights. It's kind of been functioned as almost like a shadow government for them in a parliamentary system. And so I think it has extraordinary conflicts of interest. As you pointed out, it gets money from the government, apparently 40 to 50 million per year from the US government. It's very, very well funded. It has, $100 million building. And so it really is this bastion of uh, national security elites that create a media and elite consensus around policy through the use of very, very skilled propaganda. And it's clear that this is what is happening in this situation.